From ancient scrolls to modern classics, welcome to Whispers of Japanese Tales.
Hoichi the Earless by Yakumo Koizumi. Over 700 years ago, at Dan no Ura in the Shimonoseki Strait, the final battle of the long-standing conflict between the Heike clan, also known as the Taira family, and the Genji clan, also known as the Minamoto family, was fought. At Dan no Ura, the Heike clan was completely destroyed, along with their women, children, and the young emperor, now remembered as Emperor Antoku. And so, for 700 years, the sea and its shores were haunted by the vengeful spirits of the Heike clan. Elsewhere, I have told readers about the strange Heike crab found there, whose shells bear the likeness of human faces and are said to contain the souls of Heike warriors. However, throughout the coastal area, many other mysterious phenomena are witnessed and heard. On dark nights, thousands of ghostly lights drift aimlessly along the water's edge or flicker over the waves, pale blue flames that the fishermen call onibi, or demon fire. When the wind rises, loud cries, like the clamor of battle, can be heard coming from the sea. The spirits of the Heike clan were once far more restless than they are now. At night, they would appear near passing boats, attempting to sink them, and constantly lie in wait for swimmers, seeking to drag them down into the depths. To console these restless spirits, the Buddhist temple of Amidaji was built at Akama Shrine, and its cemetery was established along the nearby shoreline. Within that cemetery, several stone monuments were erected, engraved with the names of the drowned emperor and his loyal retainers. Buddhist memorial services were solemnly and meticulously held there for the repose of their spirits. Since the temple's establishment and the creation of the graves, the Heike clan spirits caused less misfortune than before. However, from time to time, they still engaged in mysterious acts, serving as evidence that they had not yet found complete peace. Several hundred years ago, there lived in Akama Shrine a blind man named Hoichi, who was renowned for his exceptional skill in recitation and biwa playing. From childhood, he had been trained in both recitation and performance, and even as a boy, he surpassed his masters. As a professional biwa hoshi, he became famous for reciting tales of the Heike and Genji clans, and it was said that even demons could not hold back their tears when he sang of the Battle of Dan no Ura. Hoichi was extremely poor at the start of his career, but he had a kind friend who helped him. This friend was the chief priest of Amidaji Temple, a man with a deep love for poetry and music. He often invited Hoichi to the temple to perform, both reciting and playing the biwa. Later, the priest, deeply impressed by the boy's extraordinary talent, suggested that Hoichi make the temple his home. Grateful for the offer, Hoichi accepted it. Thus, Hoichi was given a room in the temple, and the only condition for his meals and lodging was that he would play the biwa to entertain the priest on evenings when he had no other duties. One summer night, the priest was called to perform a Buddhist memorial service at the home of a deceased parishioner. He left the temple, taking the temple clerk with him and leaving Hoichi behind. It was a hot evening, and the blind Hoichi stepped out onto the veranda in front of his sleeping quarters to cool off. The veranda overlooked a small garden at the back of Amidaji Temple. Hoichi waited for the priest's return, practicing the biwa to soothe his loneliness. Midnight had passed, but the priest had not yet come back. The air remained stiflingly hot, making it uncomfortable to stay indoors, so Hoichi remained outside. Before long, he heard footsteps approaching from the direction of the back gate. Someone crossed the garden, walked up to the veranda, and stopped right in front of Hoichi, but it was not the priest. A powerful voice suddenly called out Hoichi's name, abruptly and rudely, like a samurai summoning a servant. Hoichi. Startled, Hoichi was too shocked to respond at first. Then, the voice called again, this time in a tone like a strict command. Hoichi. Yes, the blind man replied, trembling at the threatening voice. I am blind. I cannot tell who is calling me. The stranger softened his tone and began to speak. There is no need to be afraid. I am someone who lives near this temple, and I have been sent to deliver a message to you. The Lord I now serve is a person of very high rank. He is currently staying here in Akama Shrine with a large and distinguished entourage. Today, he visited the battlefield at Dan no Ura, as he wished to see the site of the battle. My lord has heard that you are skilled at recounting the tale of that battle and wishes to hear your performance. Therefore, bring your biwa and come with me immediately to the house where these noble persons are waiting for you. At that time, it was not easy to defy the orders of a samurai. And so, Hoichi put on his straw sandals, took his biwa, and went out with the stranger. The man guided Hoichi skillfully, but Hoichi had to walk at a rather hurried pace to keep up. Moreover, the hand that led him felt as hard as iron. The clinking sound of the man's footsteps soon revealed that he was fully clad in armor, likely a guard or retainer of some noble residence. Hoichi's initial fear subsided, and he began to think about his good fortune. This was because he recalled the retainer mentioning a person of very high rank, and Hoichi concluded that the lord who wished to hear his recitation must undoubtedly be a first-class daimyo. Before long, the samurai came to a stop. Hoichi realized they had arrived at a large gate. He found it strange, as he did not recall there being any grand gates in that area of the town other than the main gate of Amidaji Temple. "Open the gate," the samurai called out. At once, the sound of a bar being removed echoed, and the two entered. They crossed a wide garden and stopped once more before another entrance. "There," the samurai called out in a loud voice, "someone inside. I have brought Hoichi." Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps, sliding doors opening, shutters being drawn, and women's voices filled the air. From their words, Hoichi understood that they were servants of a noble household. However, he could not figure out where exactly he had been brought. Still, he had no time to dwell on it further. Guided by the hand, Hoichi climbed several stone steps. At the final step, he was told to remove his sandals. Then, led by a woman's hand, he passed through an expanse of polished wooden floors, turned countless corners around pillars he could not keep track of, and crossed an astonishingly vast area of tatami-covered floors before being brought to the center of a large room. Hoichi sensed that many people were gathered there. The rustling of silk sounded like the leaves of a forest stirred by the wind. Then, Hoichi also heard the low murmuring of many voices, as if a crowd were speaking in subdued tones. The words they spoke were in the refined language of the imperial court. He was told to make himself comfortable, and he realized that a cushion had been prepared for him. Sitting down on it, he began to tune his biwa. A woman's voice then addressed him. It seemed to Hoichi that she was an elderly lady, likely the chief maid in charge of overseeing the household's affairs. She spoke to him. "His lordship requests that you accompany the biwa and recite the tale of the Heike," said the woman. Now, telling the entire story would take several nights, so Hoichi readily asked, "I cannot recount the entire tale at once. Which section does his lordship wish to hear?" The woman replied, "Recite the story of the Battle of Dan no Ura. That section is the most poignant and sorrowful of all." Hoichi raised his voice and sang the fierce ballad of the naval battle, skillfully evoking the scenes with his biwa. He imitated the sound of oars pulling and boats advancing, the sharp whistle of flying arrows, the cries of men, the thud of footsteps, the clash of blades striking helmets, and the splash of the fallen plunging into the sea, all with astonishing realism. During pauses in his performance, Hoichi heard murmurs of admiration from both sides of him. "What an incredibly skilled biwa player. We've never heard biwa played like this in our province. There surely isn't another singer like Hoichi in the entire land." Encouraged by these words, Hoichi played and sang with even greater mastery. Eventually, the awe of his performance caused the entire room to fall silent, like a forest in stillness. But when Hoichi reached the final part, recounting the tragic fate of the helpless, the women and children, and the sorrowful end of the young emperor, held in the arms of the nun of second rank as she plunged into the sea, the audience let out a collective, prolonged cry of shuddering anguish and torment. Afterward, they all broke into loud, uncontrollable weeping and lamentation. Hoichi himself was startled by the intense grief his performance had stirred. For a while, the sound of sobbing and mourning filled the air. However, gradually, the sounds of lamentation faded away, giving way to an extraordinary silence. In that stillness, Hoichi heard the voice of the woman he assumed to be the elderly lady. She said, "We had heard that you are a master of the biwa and that no one can compare to you in singing, but we never imagined that you possess such extraordinary skill as you have shown us tonight. His lordship was greatly pleased and has instructed me to inform you that he intends to reward you generously. Furthermore, his lordship wishes for you to perform before him once each night for the next 6 nights. After that, he will likely depart on his journey. Therefore, please come to this place again at the same hour tomorrow night. The retainer who guided you tonight will come again to escort you tomorrow. Additionally, I have been instructed to convey one more message to you. While his lordship is staying in Akama Shrine, you must not tell anyone about your visits to this residence. His lordship is traveling incognito, and it is his express wish that such matters remain entirely confidential. You may now freely return to your temple." Hoichi expressed his gratitude profusely and was led by the woman to the entrance of the house, where the same retainer who had guided him earlier was waiting. The retainer then escorted Hoichi back to the temple. The retainer brought him as far as the veranda at the back of the temple, where he bid farewell and departed. Hoichi returned just as dawn was breaking, but no one had noticed his absence from the temple. The priest, having come back very late, had assumed Hoichi was asleep. During the day, Hoichi was able to get some rest and said nothing about the strange events of the previous night. That night, the samurai came again to fetch him and took him to the noble gathering. There, Hoichi performed once more and achieved the same level of success as he had the previous night. However, during this second absence, it was accidentally discovered that Hoichi had left the temple. When he returned in the morning, he was summoned before the priest. In a gentle yet reproachful tone, the priest said, "Hoichi, we were very worried about you. It's dangerous for someone who cannot see to go out alone so late at night. Why did you leave without informing us? If you had told us, we could have sent a servant to accompany you." "And where exactly did you go?" Hoichi replied evasively. "Please forgive me, priest, I had a personal matter to attend to, and I could not handle it at any other time." The priest, noticing Hoichi's silence, felt more astonished than worried. It struck him as unnatural, and he began to suspect that something sinister might be involved. He grew concerned that the blind young man might have been possessed by a demon or deceived in some way. The priest refrained from asking Hoichi any further questions, but he secretly instructed the temple servants to keep an eye on Hoichi's actions. He told them that if Hoichi attempted to leave the temple after nightfall, they were to follow him. The very next evening, when Hoichi slipped out of the temple, the servants immediately lit their lanterns and set out after him. However, it was a rainy night and extremely dark. Before the temple servants could even make it to the road, Hoichi's figure had vanished completely. Indeed, Hoichi must have been walking at an unusually fast pace, remarkable considering his blindness, especially given the poor condition of the road. The servants hurried through the town, searching for the house Hoichi might have been visiting, but no one they asked knew anything about him. Finally, they took the coastal road back to the temple. As they neared Amidaji's cemetery, they were startled to hear the sound of a biwa being played vigorously from within the graveyard. Aside from 2 or 3 ghostly lights flickering in the darkness, common on such gloomy nights, the area was pitch black. The servants quickly made their way into the graveyard and, by the light of their lanterns, found Hoichi. He was sitting alone in the rain before the memorial tomb of Emperor Antoku, playing his biwa and chanting the tale of the Battle of Dan no Ura. Around him, behind him, and atop the countless nearby graves, ghostly flames burned like candles, illuminating the eerie scene. Never before had so many ghostly lights been seen by human eyes. "Hoichi! Hoichi!" the servants called out. "You've been bewitched by something, Hoichi." But it seemed the blind man could not hear them. With intense focus, he continued to strum his biwa with resounding force, reciting the tale of the Battle of Dan no Ura even more fervently. The servants grabbed hold of Hoichi and, putting their mouths close to his ear, shouted, "Hoichi! Hoichi, come home with us right away." Reproachfully, Hoichi turned to the men and said, "How dare you interrupt me in this manner before such noble persons? I cannot forgive such behavior." Despite the eerie nature of the situation, the servants couldn't help but burst into laughter at his words. It was clear that Hoichi had been bewitched by something, so the servants seized him, lifted him up, and hurriedly carried him back to the temple. There, following the priest's orders, they removed Hoichi's soaked clothing, dressed him in fresh garments, and gave him food and drink. Afterward, the priest insisted that Hoichi fully explain his astonishing behavior. Hoichi hesitated for a long time before speaking. However, realizing that his actions had genuinely worried and angered the kind-hearted priest, Hoichi finally decided to break his silence. He recounted everything that had happened, starting from the moment the samurai first appeared to him. After listening, the priest said, "You poor man. Hoichi, your life is now in great danger. It is truly unfortunate that you did not tell me everything sooner. Your extraordinary musical skill has drawn you into a mysterious and perilous situation. You must now understand that you are not visiting a house at all, but instead spending your nights among the graves in the cemetery, amidst the tombs of the Heike clan. Tonight, the servants saw you sitting in the rain, and it was in front of the memorial tomb of Emperor Antoku. Everything you imagined was an illusion, except for the visitations of the dead. Once you listened to the words of the deceased, you unwittingly surrendered yourself to their will. If you continue to listen to what they say, they will tear you apart. In any case, sooner or later, they will kill you. However, tonight I cannot stay with you. I have been called to perform another memorial service. Before I leave, I must protect your body by inscribing it with sacred sutras." Before sunset, the priest and the temple clerk stripped Hoichi naked, and, using brushes, inscribed the words of the Heart Sutra over every part of his body, his chest, back, head, face, neck, arms, legs, and even the soles of his feet. When they finished, the priest gave Hoichi these instructions. "Tonight, as soon as I leave, you must go and sit on the veranda and wait. Someone will come for you. However, no matter what happens, you must not respond or move. Remain silent and sit still, stay as if you were in deep meditation. If you move or make the slightest sound, you will be torn to pieces. Do not be afraid, and do not even think about calling for help. Calling for help will do you no good. If you follow my instructions exactly, the danger will pass, and there will be nothing more to fear. After sunset, the priest and the temple clerk departed, leaving Hoichi to carry out his instructions. Hoichi took his place on the veranda as directed, setting his biwa on the wooden floor beside him. He assumed a meditative posture and remained completely still, carefully avoiding even a cough or an audible breath. Hours passed as he waited in silence. At last, he heard footsteps approaching from the direction of the road. The footsteps passed through the gate, crossed the garden, and stopped near the veranda, directly in front of him. "Hoichi!" a powerful voice called out. But Hoichi held his breath and remained motionless where he sat. "Hoichi!" the terrifying voice called out again. And then a third time, in an even more ferocious tone. "Hoichi!" Still, Hoichi sat as still as a stone. Then the voice, now tinged with frustration, muttered. "No response. This won't do. I'll have to see where he's hiding." Heavy footsteps ascended the veranda. The steps moved slowly and deliberately, drawing closer and closer until they stopped right beside Hoichi. For a moment, which felt like an eternity, Hoichi sat in utter stillness, his entire body trembling with the pounding of his heart. The silence was so profound it was suffocating. Finally, a rough voice right next to him exclaimed, "Here's the biwa." But as for the biwa player, there's only these 2 ears. No wonder there was no reply. There's no mouth to speak with. Nothing remains of the biwa player's body except for these ears. "Very well, I'll take these ears to his lordship. That should suffice as proof that I followed his orders to the best of my ability." At that moment, Hoichi felt iron-like fingers grasp his ears and tear them off. The pain was excruciating. But he did not cry out. The heavy footsteps retreated along the veranda, descended into the garden, moved toward the road, and eventually faded into silence. Hoichi felt warm, thick liquid dripping down from both sides of his head, but he dared not raise his hands to touch it. Before dawn, the priest returned to the temple. The priest hurried to the veranda at the back of the temple, but as he stepped forward, he slipped on something sticky. Horrified, he cried out. It was blood, as revealed by the light of his lantern. Yet, he saw Hoichi still sitting in a meditative posture, blood streaming down from the wounds on the sides of his head. "Poor Hoichi," the priest exclaimed in shock. "What has happened to you? Are you injured?" Upon hearing the priest's voice, Hoichi felt a sense of relief. He suddenly began to weep. Through his tears, he recounted the events of that night. Poor Hoichi," the priest cried out. "It's all my fault. It's a terrible mistake on my part. I wrote sutras over every part of your body, but your ears were left untouched. I had left the task of writing the sutras on your ears to the temple clerk. It was my fault for not making sure the temple clerk had indeed written the sutras on your ears, but there's nothing that can be done about it now. The only thing left is to heal your wounds as quickly as possible. Hoichi, rejoice. The danger has now completely passed. You will never again be troubled by such visitors." With the help of a compassionate doctor, Hoichi's injuries healed in due time. The story of this mysterious event spread far and wide, and soon, Hoichi became famous. Many noble people traveled to Akama to hear Hoichi's recitations. As a result, Hoichi received generous gifts of money and became wealthy. However, ever since the incident, he became known by the name Earless Hoichi.
Until we meet again, may the stories of Japan inspire your days. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales.